podcast on climate change, part of the Ramphal Dialogues. I'm your host, Abhiir, and today I'm delighted to have with me Professor Pankaj Jain, with whom I will be talking about climate change. Professor Pankaj Jain is an internationally recognized academic leader in sustainability, Jain studies, film studies, and diaspora studies. He's the head of the Department of Humanities and Languages and the chair of the India Center at Flame University. Dr. Jain is widely quoted in various American and India media outlets. In July 2020, the New York Times interviewed him, and in 2019, Morgan Freeman interviewed him for the National Geographic series, The Story of God. He's a recipient of the Fulbright Nehru Fellowship for Environmental Leadership, as well as the Werner Wren Grant, amongst many other grants. It's wonderful to have you with us, sir.
Thank you, Abhiir. Thank you, and nice to be here with you.
So I'm just going to dive right in. I was very curious about your personal journey because you went from studying computer science in college, and now you're a professor of not just languages, but also religion. And now, in recent times, even an advocate for sustainability. So, tell us a bit about what motivated you to undertake this journey, how you channeled your interests into becoming career options. And, I was reading about you, I think pretty early on, you started working with an organization called Green Faith in the US. And you also got your Fulbright Scholarship for Environmental Leadership. So how did all these interests come together and bring you to where you are today?
Yeah, I grew up in a very small town called Pali in Rajasthan. And I always was interested in traditional practices. Through my mother, of course, we all got some hints of, how a neem datun can be used for toothbrush and so on. But being a son of my father, who is an engineer, I also had to follow his footsteps and became an engineer as well in computer science. That time, computer science was very new. So I first did what almost every male child does in India. But as I left for US, I really started missing my heritage, my cultural background, which was always my passion, the Indian classical music and philosophical texts and all. So that started my journey to explore my own heritage. That inspired me to, as soon as I reached in the US, I took it really seriously, my heritage. And I completely left IT career after a couple of years, and became a full-time student at Columbia University and doing my master's in religion. And then after that, I applied for PhD. And while taking PhD courses at the University of Iowa, I started looking for a topic that should be relevant to contemporary issues, not just, I could have taken the manuscript and I could have translated, from Sanskrit to English or whatever, Prakrit to English or whatever. But then I thought that let's take an issue, a topic that is beyond party lines, left and right. It's not a left or right issue. I think it's not an Indian or American issue. It's a global issue. It's an issue of our times. It's a crisis now of our times. And I think all sides should be, if not already, on the board to try to solve this problem. So that became my PhD topic. I did take a PhD course, and then from there, I saw that there are references made for Bishnoi community in one of the texts on environmental issues. But there was no proper study of the entire history of the Bishnoi community, what all they've been doing for environmental reasons and so on, causes for centuries. So that was one community that I studied for my PhD research. Then the Swadhyay community and the Bhil community, which are called as tribal community in Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh border. So that became my PhD thesis, and that became my first book. And then from there, so as I was completing my PhD, Green Faith, I was living in New Jersey at that time. I was working, PhD was from University of Iowa, but I was doing my dissertation work in New Jersey, where my family also was there at that time. And Green Faith was just launched by Reverend Fletcher Harper. It's an interfaith movement to unite all the different religious communities. As I said in the beginning, climate issue is not left or right issue. So even religious people are now looking for the ways to unite the communities that can take this issue of climate change. Pope Francis is a great example, as you know very well. So Green Faith was looking for a scholar, for a speaker who can connect Indian traditional cultural topics with environmental issues. So my research being on Hinduism and Jainism, Buddhism, I was chosen as their resident scholar in residence. So with their invitation, I wrote one of the first such article column on widely published on various websites, called as 10 Key Hindu Environmental Teachings. And it is on Huffington Post, some many other websites also, Hinduism Today magazine and many others. So that was, we're talking 2007, long before India a lot of people were not even talking about environmental issues. Now many people are talking, but still not enough. So my journey into environmental issues is starting from 2005, more than 15 years ago. And my PhD was in 2008, and then Green Faith, working with Green Faith, and then I have been teaching these topics in the Dallas area for a long time, for almost a decade. And now I'm back in India. I'm at Flame University, where I'm trying to do similar work here in India now.
Absolutely. So that's really interesting. I know you mentioned your first book was based on these tribal communities. I think you mentioned the Bishnoi community. Just for our listeners, could you tell us a little bit more about who these communities really are, where they're based, and what are some of whether they're examples or what are just some of their practices which make them a great example, not just for Indians, but for people around the world in terms of sustainability practices?
Yes, now in America, where I was for more than 2 decades, I lived in America, and now I'm back in India. But so in America, there is this word, when I taught these courses at the University of North Texas, where I was associate professor, every time I introduced the word tree hugger, it would generate a chuckle among my students. So tree hugger is kind of a joke in the US because they are sort of crazy people and running around for environmental issues, but they have no touch with the reality or whatever. But this word tree hugger actually came into our language, into English, from Chipko movement. Chipko means tree hugging, right? So Chipko movement saved thousands of trees in the Himalayan regions of Garhwal in Uttarakhand, right? So as we all know, Sundarlal Bahuguna, Vandana Shiva, Chandi Prasad Bhatt, they're all connected with Chipko movement. But Chipko movement apparently took that inspiration to hug the trees from a Bishnoi woman in 18th century, early 18th century, who Amrita Devi, who and more than 363 Bishnoi men, women, and children, they literally hugged their khejuri tree as the soldiers from Jodhpur came to cut the trees. These people literally hugged their trees, and that's how they saved hundreds of trees in their village in Pali Jodhpur area, where actually I am also from that region. So I'm very familiar with the region and that language. So that became my first community that I researched. Bishnoi community is also known, was in the news when early 90s, when Salman Khan was shooting for this film called Hum Saath Saath Hain. So Salman Khan, Saif Ali Khan, Tabu, and Neelam, they all took some break time, and they went out for doing some hunting expedition in the Pali Jodhpur area. And as they shot a black buck, Bishnoi people jumped to the spot and caught Salman Khan, and he's still fighting this lawsuit, over decades now. So Bishnoi community, that's how Bishnoi community came into the news. But Salman Khan is a very recent example. They've been doing these things for centuries. They have caught many other hunters, poachers. Anytime anybody tries to hurt their flora and fauna, deer, bucks, black bucks, or even khejuri tree, they are the first to save their flora and fauna, because the ecology is so fragile in Rajasthani desert villages. So if Bishnoi communities like Bishnois are at the forefront of saving their very fragile natural system. So that's my first community. Then Swadhyay community is also spread across Western India, Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Rajasthan. And they have constructed new sacred groves in Gujarat, especially, where every district now has a new sacred grove, where people come together and revere these trees and plants, and whatever produce that comes out of these plants and trees is treated like divine prasad, right? And so that prasad is distributed among the villagers, not as a charity, but as a prasad from nature, prasad from Bhagwan. So it's a very nice concept of constructing new sacred. We know that sacred groves are spread across the world, but those are all very ancient sacred groves. What Swadhyay Parivar has done is constructed new sacred groves, new sacred gardens, right, or sacred divine forests, where the idea is not to save this is not done to save the biodiversity or to fight the climate change. These are the experiments, as they call them, experiments to connect humans with reverence and gratitude towards nature and towards God. So it's basically, or Bhagwan, it's basically to express their gratitude towards Bhagwan, to practice their dharma. Similarly, in the Bhil villages, where when I went in Banswara, Dungarpur, southern Rajasthan area, wherever there are any small shrines, right, and then around the shrines, all those forest patches are still saved, still intact. Because of the presence of these small shrines, forest patches are saved. So again, the idea is, because of the sacred beliefs and rituals and traditional practices, these patches of forests are saved, flora and fauna is saved by Bishnois, and new environmental resources are being generated by Swadhyay in the name of spirituality, not in the name of fighting the climate change. So this
Right.
is what we call as dharmic ecology. This is not deep ecology. This is not shallow ecology. This is not utilitarian ecology, but this is dharmic ecology. Practice of
Okay.
dharma and saving the ecology as a byproduct. So which is
Absolutely.
a unique concept.
Yeah, no,
Definition.
I think that's very interesting. I mean, as you know, an environmentalist myself, I was, of course, very familiar with the Chipko movement, and I think it's got international recognition as well. But you know, this sort of backstory that you shared with us is really interesting, not something that I'd heard of previously. But you know, pushing a bit further, building on exactly this theme, um, as you yourself just said, you know, the intersectionality of religion and sustainability is a little known field, and one occasionally tends to come across a news feature every now and then on certain tribal practices, and you know, maybe a good versus bad focus where urbanization is threatening those said practices, but there's very little focus on how religious aspects drives practitioners of those religions towards sustainability. So it would be interesting if you could share your thoughts on that.
Yes, so as I already mentioned, right, these three communities are all inspired by their dharmic traditions, their spiritual traditions. Their focus is not the environment, but the focus is on practicing their dharma, following their guru's teachings, whatever. So Guru Jambeshwar, the founder of Bishnoi community, in 15th century,
Mm-hmm.
he laid down 29 rules. In those 29 rules, 29 that became the word for Bishnoi. Bishnoi 29. Bish is 20, Noi is 9.
Okay.
So
Okay.
those 29 rules, they cover spirituality, hygiene, environmentalism, cleanliness, morality, spirituality. All of these things are intertwined.
Sure.
To take shower every day is one of the rules. Do not cut green trees is another rule.
Mm-hmm.
Do not eat meat is another rule. So vegetarianism, saving the trees is all part of Vishnoi Dharma. So that's for
Right.
5 centuries they have been doing these things.
Yeah. So that's
So,
interesting because nowadays when we're seeing veganism and vegetarianism coming up as schools of thought within you know, within the climate action movement.
yes.
You know, recently we had COP26, and there was so much criticism about how world leaders on one hand were arguing about climate change, but on the other hand, the menus were full of meat. So you know, that's definitely an interesting point that you make. But you know, you're also your research interest also focuses on languages. You know, and in my limited knowledge of languages, I've always found it interesting to have comparisons or conversely similarities between certain languages and certain themes which are there, because you know, it's said that all languages come from a mother tongue or a mother root. There are so do you think that just like religion, as you said, has been driving the Bishnoi community for so many years, do you think there are also interlinkages with language?
Yes, certainly. For example, if you notice, my first book's title is not religion and ecology, it's Dharma and Ecology, because I really wanted to bring in the idea of Dharma here. Dharma root, Dharma is the word in Sanskrit, as you know, Dharma, but not just in Sanskrit, but all Indian languages have this word Dharma also. I actually did a survey with Tamil speaking people, Malayalam speaking people, Telugu, Marathi, Bengali, Assamese, all regional languages have this term Dharma.
Okay.
Dharma, root word for Dharma is Dhri. Dhri means to sustain. Now we talk about sustainability and sustenance. Dharma is also about sustaining. So what is Dharma sustaining? Dharma sustains the world, the worldly affairs and the cosmic affairs. It's all about sustaining the world, sustaining the planet. And that is what is sustainability all about. So that is why I really wanted to highlight Dharma in my title of the book. And that's my central thesis of the book, is that Dharma has this inherent ideas of sustainability.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
Right. Dharma replaces even earlier notion of rhythm in Rig Veda. The word uses rhythm. Now, rhythm is also about cosmic rhythm, was what was called as rhythm in the Rig Veda. Okay. Then within the later parts of Rig Veda, rhythm is replaced by dharma in the Purush Sutta, for 1090 Purush Sutta in Rig Veda. So rhythm and dharma are now synonymous. What was rhythm before cosmic rhythm becomes dharma in the later part of the Rig Veda, which again means to sustain the entire cosmos. That is what sustainability is all about. So language does play a very important role, and similarly other words such as karma and punarjan, all these notions that we have in Sanskrit and other Indian languages can all be linked with environmental issues, as I've shown in my article, 10 key environmental Hindu teachings, which is available on Huffington Post and other resources on websites on internet.
Right. And Dr. Jain, I was also reading your article in the Times of India, and you had also made certain linkages, or rather, I would say you'd used examples from the Mahabharata and the Ramayana or some other similar text, if I'm not wrong. And I found it really interesting how you were comparing texts which are hundreds of years old to contemporary I wouldn't call them practices, but certainly contemporary considerations in terms of climate action. So it would be great if you could share some of those. And also, is your new book really about that, or what does your new book focus on?
I published 2 books on environmental issues. First was the result of my PhD dissertation with Bishnois and Swadhyais and Bhil communities of Rajasthan, Gujarat areas. Second book came out of my Fulbright research. So Fulbright Fellowship is given by the Department of State in the US. And that book, the research for that book led me to Uttarakhand, where I worked with an NGO called HESCO, Himalayan Environmental Study and Conservation Organization, HESCO in Uttarakhand, in Dehradun and other areas of Uttarakhand. And the second community that I chose for my second book is a Sikh community in Sultanpur, where Guru Nanak attained his enlightenment. So where Guru Nanak attained his enlightenment, right there, that river itself was extremely polluted, very ironical and very sad. But a Sikh guru, Baba Sichewal, he single-handedly started cleaning that river in the name of reverence for his guru, Guru Nanak. And as he started cleaning the river called Kali Bain, river itself was called his Black River. It was so polluted. So Baba Sichewal single-handedly started cleaning the river. And looking at the guru, looking at Baba Sichewal, his followers also jumped into the river literally and started cleaning the river. So that effort, again, inspired by spirituality, Sikhism in this case, and environmental issues, we got the result of a very clean river. When I went to meet Baba Sichewal, he himself, invited me to sit with him in the boat, and he drove his boat across the river. Now, no longer Kali. It's a very transparent, very clean river now in Punjab. So that's the 2 communities that I looked for in my second book. So those are the 2 books that I've researched.
So, I mean, I wish we had similar such Babas alongside the Ganga, because if there was a similar such movement over there, the country would really benefit from it, and the world at large, because, all that water is also going down into the oceans.
Exactly.
But that's interesting, because I was comparing the examples you used in that article to this, and it's not just, there, but as we can see, just in modern times as well, I think there is this power, this capacity that religion has to drive people towards sustainability. And I think it's interesting because, typically we conventionally look towards leaders like Greta Thunberg or Al Gore, or activists also. But at the end of the day, we also have to think about the fact that, especially not just, in India, it's Hinduism, Islam. In the US, it's a lot of Christianity, but everywhere, one thing that ties people together is their interest and their faith, whichever faith it is. So I think looking at how religions can drive people towards sustainability is, as you yourself said, a very understudied and underappreciated fact, which we can look at in more detail. And towards that same point, I think I was also reading that you chair the India Center at Flame. So as an advocate for sustainability myself, I've been very inspired by traditional Indian practices, which are extremely environmentally friendly. You began by mentioning the datun, which is a neem stick. And today, as an environmentalist, I find myself being asked this question very often by fellow students, by school students who I give workshops to. And the most common question is, what can we do sitting at home, for the environment? And I tell them that it's not about doing everything right. It's about doing a few things right and then increasing it one by one. Right? Because we don't need 1,000 environmentalists living a perfectly sustainable lifestyle, but we need millions of environmentalists living an
Yes.
imperfectly sustainable
Yes.
lifestyle. And in that sense, I tell them that switch from a shower to a bucket bath, switch from plastic toothbrushes to bamboo toothbrushes. But then one day I had this young class 6 7 student who stood up and said, why even bamboo toothbrushes? They have plastic. Why don't we use, the bristles may have plastic. So why not use datuns? Because my grandmother told me we used to use
Yes.
those. So do you know of any other such similar practices? I mean, now the datun and bamboo toothbrush example is becoming more common, but were there any other such practices which you've come across either while
Yes. Yes.
studying or which you know of,
Yes. Yes.
which promote such practices?
Yes. 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 Abhiir, actually, a few years back, for 5 or 6 years, non-stop, continuously, National Geographic magazine in the US
Mm-hmm.
did a survey of green, which is called as now green, which they call as Green Dex, Green
Okay.
Index of World Economies.
Mm-hmm.
So they measured the carbon footprint of India, China, Brazil, Australia, France, Germany, UK, Canada, US, Australia, major economies of the world, Brazil, including Brazil and South America. And every survey, India has come out at the top,
Okay.
because our entire practices still are really compared to other economies, even compared to Brazil and China,
Mm-hmm.
our carbon footprint remains at the lowest level. The reason is our habits are still not towards consuming a lot of stuff. I'll give you some examples. For example, our food.
Mm-hmm.
Even if some people are consuming some portions of meat in their diet, but even our meat eating people are not eating beef at such a huge level as what is happening in European countries or in the US or in Canada, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our meat eating people are mostly eating chicken, maybe that too, not three times a day, I would think, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe some mutton, but again, not 3 times a day. So because of our food habits, large portion of our diet is vegetarian food, lentils, rice, dal, roti, sabzi, maybe vegetables, fruits, and so on. So
Mm-hmm.
because of our food practices, our carbon footprint remains at one of the lowest levels. Then our living style, we still don't have even in our houses 24/7 hot water. We don't have that still. We don't have central air conditioning unit installed in all our offices, in all our homes. We still don't have that. We still don't have, if we have a family of 4 people, we still don't have 4 cars or 2 cars in family of 4. Even
Absolutely.
if we have one car, we will end up using
Sharing.
public transport.
Yeah.
If somebody is living in Delhi, probably they would prefer to take a metro just to avoid the traffic. So
Absolutely.
our living style, our driving style, our commuting style and our houses size are still not huge bungalows. We are
Mm.
all reduced to living flats because of all these habits and limitations of living in India. Because of so many people, 1.4 billion people, in such a less space, naturally we are forced to live in a very sustainable lifestyle. Unlike
Mhm.
China, where it's such huge space, or unlike in European or American diets, which are all based on red meat.
Yeah.
Red meat, which is not just extremely dangerous and threatening and devastating for the planet, it is also equally harmful for our
Unhealthy.
own health.
Yeah.
Red meat is at the lowest consumption level in India. Car ownership rate is one of the lowest levels in India compared to other economies. So these are major habits that if we can just stick to these habits, we will continue to do our part. Per capita carbon footprint will continue to be one of the lowest in India. Now that should not be an excuse to, that because we have per capita carbon footprint very low, that doesn't give us any license to become reckless and keep
Mhm.
throwing plastic everywhere. Thankfully, I hope many states have already introduced this one-time usage of plastic is completely
Yeah.
banned. So all of these things should really become a movement, and it is becoming. I just was reading just last week, India has met its COP26 target 9 years ahead of time.
Yeah. For solar
Already
energy as well.
40% of renewable energy
Yeah.
40% of our energy is coming from non-fossil fuel sources. We are 9 years ahead in
Yeah.
COP26 target. So if we keep doing these things, this entire day today, Abhiir, I spent calling my friends and relatives in Mumbai area, because I know a solar panel vendor who
Mhm.
is promising that he can install solar panels in all homes, offices, villages, schools, colleges at
Wow.
lower cost than fossil fuel based energy that they
Yeah.
are using. So it's up to us, people like you and me, to connect these solar panel vendors with actual consumers, which are our friends, relatives. So because spark becomes fire, and fire
Absolutely.
should become wildfire.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I think you hit the nail on the head, because it's up to everyone to individually sort of take up a cause that they feel passionately for, and then to spread that message. But to conclude, I think, Dr. Jain, I want to ask you, as you yourself said, or at least in my opinion, I don't think the world has seen a religious leader like Pope Francis, who's so
Yes.
open towards so many
Yes.
different things. And one of those messagings being around climate change and climate action. How do you think we take this message to the next level? Because as I was mentioning just a few minutes ago, I think you've identified that segment of society which brings together religion, where people have faith, where they will listen to their religious leaders. So how do we channel this in the right direction? How do we make this not just, say, certain communities in India or say Pope Francis, but how do we make this an interfaith, international green faith movement, so
Yes,
to
yes.
say?
By
Yeah.
doing these things, what we are doing now, I think
Mhm.
more and more discussions, more and more sharing the ideas. See, many of my friends whom I was calling this morning, they didn't even know that solar panels have become so cheap now in India.
Yeah.
And everybody has this stereotype that, oh, solar panel is very
Really
expensive.
expensive. Yeah.
I think it's up to us to keep spreading the awareness that it is great to be green, cost effective to be green, and you feel so good and morally right thing you're doing for the planet, for your budget, for everybody. You're doing good thing if you switch to solar panel. If you keep reducing your meat consumption, it's good for everybody, your own health and for
Absolutely.
planet's health. So it's
Yeah.
for up to us to keep spreading the awareness. And Abhiir, people like you will be the leader for the future. I wish there are 1,000 more Abhiirs in every
Thank you.
college. And so in my college, in Flame University, we have an environmental club. And
Mhm.
I've been sharing these ideas with them also. So that club is actually luckily very active. So they are reaching out to the upper management and they're trying to press the issue that let's go completely green. At
Mhm.
Flame, we have already switched to 10% solar panels, solar energy, non-fossil
Oh,
fuel.
that's great.
So
Yeah.
now they're trying to tell them that let's go for 100%. Now there
Yeah.
are certain limitations in terms of how much solar panels can be, can be installed and whatnot. But these are the people like you and this environmental club at Flame that we all have to keep doing these two things together. Whatever I learn, I'm also, everybody is a student. This is such a new thing.
Yeah.
Whatever I learn, I share with students. Students learn, they share with upper management, and together, I think we all, if we can continue to join our hands, and I think we can change the world for the better.